Welcome to the Clear-Sighted Career Online Learning Series brought to you by the University of Notre Dame's Alumni Association. My name is Sharon Kane and I serve as Director of Professional and Academic Programs. And we welcome you to this webinar, Leadership Insights for Your Personal Best, Part 2. We're here with our presenter, Paul Slaggert, Director of the Steyer Center for Executive Education in the renowned Mendoza College of Business. Paul, thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise around leadership. And you're going to be now continuing the conversation and providing us with leadership insights into our personal best, but also other information on leadership and management and where we are on our own leadership journey. So welcome back. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure to be back and to continue our discussion on how to become an exemplary leader, especially leveraging some of the work that our friends Kouzes and Posner and John Kotter have done for us. So what I want to do is to build on that, to talk about the exemplary practices that we introduced in the last session, and to be able to give you a way to say, how does this affect me? Where am I in this process? So what we're going to do is to use some work that John Kotter has done on what I call the leadership management matrix to be able to take a look at that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about personal best stories. How can you do that for yourself? How can you identify to give yourself some insight? Because the only way leaders develop is that they're open to insights and they're open to feedback and they want to work on themselves. So the ability to provide yourself some additional insight onto how do I do these things? Am I ready to do these things? Is the best way for you to be able to start this developmental journey to become a better leader as you go through the process. Then we'll talk a little bit about how do I apply the model and the techniques to be able to help make me, in this case you, become a better leader. But you need to know this, that I work on these things too. I have to be able to be aware in the moment, what do I do well? What do I need help on? What do I need to develop on my own? Because you don't achieve this and stop. This is a continuous developmental opportunity for people as they're trying to figure out how do I become a more effective leader. So Kotter's put together this matrix, which basically talks about leadership and management, because these things aren't totally separate. They're I have some leadership responsibilities and roles that I have. I also have some management tasks and roles and responsibilities that I have. So understanding this as a dynamic is really, really important. Because what you'll see, for instance, on that vertical axis is leadership. And it basically goes from 0 to infinity, if you think about it from that perspective. All of us fall somewhere on that. Very few of us can say we're at the high end. I'm a 10, as we go through the process. But if you're honest with yourself, you can place yourself somewhere along this, looking at the work we did last time. What are those 20 characteristics that Kouzes and Posner identified, saying, why would I willingly follow you? Or how would I describe my ideal leader? How do I do those things? What do I do well? What don't I do well? Where would I find myself on this continuum? Because I think leadership is a continuum. And I think sometimes we move back and forth on it, depending on what's going on. You can also look at the practices that Kouzes and Posner developed when they did their personal best work to say, do I do this well? Do I challenge? Do I model? Do I envision the future? How well do I do all of those things? You have to be honest with yourself. Because remember what I said about modeling the way, is that the people who follow you, the people who work for you, pay attention to you. They're looking for consistency between word and action. So if you're not doing this for yourself, I'll guarantee you they are doing it for you. So you need to be aware of what's going on. Self-awareness is crucial to this process as we go through. Well, I think what you also want to be able to do is to figure out how good of a manager am I? Because again, for the most part, it's really hard to say, oh, I'm only a leader. Most of us are, well, one of my clients calls, they're working managers. All of us have our own work that has to be done. We have meetings, reports, clients calls, proposals, whatever it is that you happen to work on. That's your work that has to be done. You also have to manage the work of the people who report to you as you go through the process. But then you also have to be able to lead. So it's important to understand the difference between leadership and management. And remember last time, the definition that I like is leadership is moving an organization forward. So understanding what leadership is crucial to that discussion. Well, it's the same with management. We have to know what that is, and we're going to talk about it at least for a little bit. My definition of management is making the trains run on time. It is short-term focus. It is goals. It is objectives. It is timetables. It is productivity. It is efficiency. It is effectiveness. It is all of those things that make our organizations work effectively to get the work done. So put yourself somewhere in this matrix. How well do I do leadership? How well do I do management? Obviously, you don't want to be in the bottom left-hand quadrant as you go through this process. You want to figure out where I am. And to be really honest, you can draw a circle around the crosshairs where those 4 quadrants meet. And that's probably where most of us will fall. What you want to do is to continue to make that upward right quadrant your goal. That's where you want to go. So you want to continue to get better as a leader. You want to continue to get better as a manager. But this starts to be able to give us some insights into how we lead and how we manage by understanding this dynamic. Because what it also says is, what happens if I don't have the right skills or capabilities to accomplish what it is I need to accomplish now? As a leader, what I have to do is, number 1, be honest with myself on what my capabilities are. 2, I have to know what my strengths and weaknesses are. John Kotter says it's the courage to recognize that you have weaknesses. And then what he says is you have to have the good sense to tap into people who complement your weaknesses. So look at this from a perspective of then how you put your teams together. Because you can identify the people who work with you and for you and put them on this matrix too. You can then get a better sense of how together you lead your organization. Because we make better decisions together by tapping into the diversity of ideas, experiences, perspectives of the wider organization. You have to understand that as a leader, you don't have to have all the answers. The world is much too complex. And in all honesty, the complexity of the decision-making that we have to make on a regular basis continues to increase. So I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the insights. But my job is to make sure that we do the best we can for the organization as a whole. And remember, that's spelled with a W. So think about your teams when you use it. So I find this matrix actually to be really useful because I can use it to evaluate myself. I can use it to better understand my team. How are we doing things? What are the strengths and weaknesses? Do I have people who complement somebody else so that together somehow I can add 1 + 1 and get something more than 2? There's a synergy that you want to be able to create. I honestly think there's a third level to the analysis that this matrix allows us to do, and that's to look at our organization to say, where do we fit into this? You can all identify organizations or make guesses on organizations that might go in different quadrants. There are organizations that were leaders, considered leaders in the industry and in the world, who over time ended up in quadrant 1. They don't exist anymore. They've been bought out by somebody else. They've had to totally reorganize and restructure their businesses or their approach as you go through business. That's because they couldn't adjust and adapt to the changes in the marketplace. People who have weak leadership can't anticipate the future. They can't move to the future. They can't explain to people why they need to change and go forward and do new things as we go through the process. your organization doesn't want to be there. If your organization is there, it's at risk for survival. My career advice to you is brush up your resume and go someplace else, because that's a very difficult place to be as an organization. It's also very, very hard to get to quadrant 4, because that means you really do all the leadership things that you need to well, and you do all the management things that you need to well. That is the goal of where you want to be able to be, though. So remember, you can look at this. There's 3 different levels at least that you can use to do analysis on how I lead, how I can make my team more effective in their capabilities of leading, and what's my organization as a whole look like as I move ahead. Be brutally honest with yourself when you look at this, but also be brutally honest when you say, where does my organization fit into this matrix? Because this can be actually a really early warning signal to people if you think you're starting to drift somewhere towards quadrant 1. Remember what I said last time, though? One of the biggest concerns for CEOs is, do I have enough people who can lead effectively, who are ready to assume leadership when we need to be able to do this? This will give you a sense in your organization where you stand in that regard. Because you have 2 choices if you're leading an organization to say, how do I build the bench strength to be able to make sure I have the right number of people who can lead effectively, who are ready to step up and assume a leadership role. I can develop them myself, or I can go find them and bring them into the organization. Those are both very valid approaches. But if you don't know what your needs are, if you don't know where you stand as an organization, you don't know what to do. You don't know if you have enough people. You don't know if your organization is ready to meet the challenges that are coming in front of you that you haven't seen yet. That's really important to be able to do that. But it's really important to also make sure you know yourself where you are. Where do you want to spend your time developing your leadership skills, your management skills and capabilities? But it's also important to understand that leadership and management are different. Leadership is one of those things that people will assume. You can identify people, you know who they are. They're the influencers. They're the people you go to that if you want to make something happen, because other people will follow them willingly as you go through the process. That's moving the organization forward. That's important. That is non-positional. You need leaders at all levels of your organization. You have to have people who can lead at all levels. It has nothing to do with their title or their position within the company. But people willingly make the decision to follow them. Management is positional. I have a title. I have very specific roles and responsibilities and authority that come to me as a manager, that are conveyed upon me by my organization. So it's important to understand what those things are. It's also important to understand that every organization has to have people who can lead well, and you have to have people who can manage well. But if you don't have people who can lead well, you're in trouble. You will be really effective and efficient if you're really high on the management. But what you can't do is to react and respond. You can't be agile. You can't make sure that you are ready for the next challenges. That takes somebody who can lead, and it takes somebody who has the willingness to step up to lead. That's challenging the process. Remember, that's the first of those 5 exemplary practices that Kouzes and Posner talked about as you go through the process. So what I want to do is kind of tie back to that initial discussion to give you some tips that you can use, because leadership is hard. I don't want to sugarcoat that for you. This is hard work. It's lonely work. It requires courage. It requires integrity. It requires persistence. It requires energy to do all of those things. But it doesn't mean you give up and say, this is too big for me. There are some really simple, easy things that you can do. So it's a short list of things to say, okay, if this is one of the practices, what can I actually do? So remember, challenging the process was the first of the exemplary practices for leadership that Kouzes and Posner talked about. So the first one is search for opportunities. Fix something small. Don't pick something that's big that's going to take forever. You want to be able to start momentum. Just fix something that you know needs to be done as you go through the process. The second is experiment and take risks. So do that. Set up some little experiments. Give people a chance to do that. And honor risk takers. Don't punish people for stepping up to try to make things better, but you have to learn from those experiences. You want people to innovate, but you have to create an environment that supports and fosters innovation. The second exemplary practice is inspiring the shared vision. So you have to know where it is you want to go. So take some time to think about that. We are all so busy every day that what we do is we focus only on the urgent, and we don't take time to think about the important and to start to work on that before it becomes urgent. Step back, take some time to just think about what's going on, where we want to be. Then you need to enlist the aid of others. You can't step forward and say, let's go, and turn around and have nobody follow you. You have to be able to say, here's where we're going to go in a way that people say, yeah, I want to go there with you. That sounds way better than where we are now. So tell them, don't just keep it in your head, but you've got to let them know that you are passionate about this as you go forward. Then you have to help them move forward. So how do I enable others to act? We talked about this the last time, fostering collaboration. You don't want competition, but you want the best decisions that you can make. By the way, that matrix that Kotter put together between leadership and management, that upper right-hand corner, that's collaboration. It's where you get the best of the leaders and the best of the managers collaborate together to make the best decisions possible for the entire organization. That's a true example of what collaboration is. So how do I make that happen? Get rid of a couple of Mickey Mouse rules that are just getting in people's way. Give people permission to be able to say, fix that. You have to empower them to be able to move ahead as they go through this. And then strengthen others. How do I get them to be recognized for what it is they do? How do I make sure that they have the skills and capabilities? How do I let them know that what they do is important to me? And a big piece of that is relational and conversational. So get to know them, know what's going on in their lives, know what's important to them. You can't motivate people if you don't know what's important to them as you go through the process. The fourth is modeling the way. Remember, everybody is paying attention to what you do as the leader. It's just part of the deal as you go through the process. So set the example. Be the one who steps forward. Exhibit the behaviors that you want people to follow and to exhibit. And have integrity. Do what you say you're going to do. And then you want to plan small wins. Make it easy for people to say yes. Make it so there's momentum going on within the organization. Build on successes as they happen because it creates its own momentum. And then those people who are kind of laying off in the weeds waiting to say, I told you so. I told you that wasn't such a good idea. You take away their opportunity to do this. And the whole organization picks up speed and momentum going the direction that you know it needs to go. And the fifth is to encourage the heart. People need to know that what they contribute is important. People need to know that you value what they provide. So recognize those. I had a participant in my executive program when I was at the University of Cincinnati. And every time we did an event, and Molly came to this event, I would get a handwritten thank you note from Molly saying, that was a great event. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to come, whatever it happens to be. And I used to kid with her, and I say, Molly, I said, your mom raised you right. But you know how important that is for people to get a handwritten note from somebody to be able to do that? It doesn't take long to be able to do that. You know, in this age also, by the way, of emails, it's really easy to send somebody a thank you note, copy their boss, copy their peers, give them that recognition, because it's so easy and simple. We just can't forget to do it. And usually I think what happens is we forget to say thank you, because you know that the reward for good work is more work. You have to be really careful of that. You want to make sure people know that you appreciate what they've done. And then you need to go out and party. You just need to be able to go out and celebrate and have a good time and relax and just do this as an organization. Life is so hectic. Things come at us so fast. The complexity is ever increasing. Every once in a while, we just need to kind of take a deep breath and say, what's going on? Well, we've covered a lot of stuff in these last two sessions. So we've talked about a definition of leadership. I want you to keep that in mind. I gave you 5. I like mine. You know I'm biased and you understand why. The others are all really good and really valid. Pick one that works for you. You have to be able to articulate to yourself and to others what you think leadership is as you go through the process. We talked about the 5 exemplary leadership practices, and we've given you some advice on how to do some of those things as you go through the process. Then what we'd like you to do is to think about, when were you at your personal best as a leader? What can you learn from that? You may have figured out by now that a big piece of all of this is learning. What do I learn? What can I do better? How can I not repeat that mistake? How can I avoid that in the future? That takes reflection, which doesn't come naturally to most of us. But it's all learning as we go through the process to be able to make that work. And you need to commit to your own leadership development. The easy part is this kind of a conversation, listening to what I have to say, reading a book like Kotter's books or Kouzes and Posner's book, coming to one of our seminars that the Stayer Center offers to people. I have some fantastic instructors who work with people. They tell everybody the same thing I'll tell you. The real work starts when you go back and try and make this happen. Leadership is not easy. Leadership is complicated. You have to commit yourself to get better at what you do. So that gives you a good sense of what this leadership thing is. I have full confidence in your capabilities and abilities to become better at what you do. To tie back into what we try to live in exec ed, which is the Mendoza commitment to asking more. Ask more of business, ask more of yourself. How do I get better? Remember, that's individual integrity. How do I make my organization better? That's organizational effectiveness. And how can I make a difference in the world? That's greater good. So I wish you the best as you try to make sure that you start or you continue your journey to become better at what you do, to be a better leader, because the world needs more people who can lead well.
Paul, thanks for sharing the various models and frameworks and really drilling down into specific suggestions that we can all act on. So thank you very much. So Paul, you've talked to us about, how to have the role of self-awareness and taking that time, investing that time into reflecting on our own personal best. Walk us through this exercise for ourselves, and again, what can be used with our teams, and share some of the specific questions, if you will.
Sure. It's actually an easy thing for people to be able to do. Kouzes and Posner have actually a lot of work in their book, and we've tried to distill it into a series of questions. And it's more to help you frame the narrative in your mind about when you were at your personal best as a leader. And when I ask people to do this, I tell them it doesn't matter where that is. And that's really important for people to understand. We don't just lead at work. We lead in our family. We lead in our communities or our the organizations that we join, the voluntary activities that we do. So I say, pick the time. It doesn't matter when, but when you are at your personal best as a leader. It can be in your current job, previous job, when you were in college. It can be a voluntary activity. It doesn't matter what it is. So I have people who tell me when they were an athlete, for instance, or a coach. I've had people talk about family situations.
Sure.
Which most people don't think about. But there are crises and things within families that somebody needs to step up and lead to be able to do those things. And it doesn't matter what it is, but what you need is a little bit of time. Because what I do with the group, and Sharon's right, this is a fantastic team building activity. Because what happens is people then share their stories. Once they complete the form that we put together for them and said, describe your personal past. And it's like an exam in the room. I mean, it's just dead quiet
and hushed.
Everybody's writing.
Do people struggle to come up with their personal best, or was it once they kind of sit quietly, does it usually come to people in a short period of time?
It actually comes really pretty quickly. Okay. You'll see a few people just kind of sitting there doing this, one way or another. But it doesn't take long before everybody is writing something down. And the questions that I've developed are based on the work that Kouzes and Posner have done. And it's literally there to stimulate their thinking about
So let's share those with our folks today.
Sure. Well, the first thing, of course, is to just describe the situation. It gives people context. But then I want more color and more flavor, within those stories, because these are big things. They're very important to people. That's why they chose this particular story to tell. So I want them to go a little bit more. What did you do? What was your role? Why? Did you step forward, or was this an opportunity given to you?
That seems an important question right there.
It really is. It really is. And they're both very legitimate, because you still have to say yes to both.
Exactly. Receptivity.
Absolutely.
Willingness.
Exactly. To step up. You have to be able to do that. So I want to get to that. The emotional piece. And usually they have felt challenged or overwhelmed or scared,
unsure,
but enthusiastic and engaged, and the whole range of emotions that people have as you go through that. So that's important. And those, as you know, they vary depending on where you are and whatever this endeavor activity is as you go through the process. So it's important to kind of unpack some of those things and find out where that comes through. So then what did you do? What were some of those key things that you did? What were the results?
Sure.
How did you get people engaged and involved? What did you learn as a key role? Because it's part of that self-awareness piece. Because what you hope is that because this was such a positive experience for people, that they'll take it forward and be able to do this again.
Right.
Not the same thing,
right,
but the ability to lead effectively.
Wouldn't they recognize the opportunity perhaps sooner and feel more comfortable and confident in stepping into that, taking that on, because it's already their awareness level has been raised, the confidence has been built a bit, and so their readiness level, if you will, is greater.
And it's usually a win, Sharon.
Yes, it's a positive.
Because almost always people will take something that worked. Because I'll ask them, and I'll say, did anybody talk about when it didn't work, when there was a failure? Every once in a while, somebody, because it was a really good learning experience, and they got better as a result of this. Most people don't go there, and that's okay. But it can be either side of the equation as you go through the process.
Sure. So I think what you're sharing is so valuable, and we want to encourage everyone to use to reflect for yourself, step through these questions in this exercise, and for those of you who are managing and leading teams, to consider using this exercise. Is there any modification if someone opts to, I've done it myself, I'm comfortable with it, I want to share it with my team? Are there any suggestions or modifications based on your experience with this, Paul?
No, I would encourage them to do it with their teams, because everybody will learn something about someone else on the team that they don't know now. Because one of the questions I also ask whenever I do this is, how many of you have told the story to somebody else?
Right.
And some of them, honestly, haven't even told it to their significant other. Now, they've gone home and complained through the middle of it, say, oh, this didn't go well or this went right. But they don't talk about the whole thing, except some people use it in I call it a behavioral interview for a job. You know,
Mhm.
give me an example, Sharon, of when you were really good. They'll pull it out then, but very seldom have they shared it with the people they work with.
Interesting.
But as you've already said, this is something they're proud of.
Right.
Well, why haven't you told somebody? Well, because we tend to not, we don't want to blow our own horn.
Right.
And it just doesn't come up to say, hey, let me share with you today when I was best as a leader. So it gives people a safe haven to be able to do this. Because what I ask people to do then is, one, fill out the form, share the stories. So everybody in the group gets to share. And then what I ask them to do is identify the common themes, because they'll see them. And it's important for them to kind of work through that process together. And it's a really good technique. It's also, if I'm the leader of this group, I now learn more about all the people who are working for me.
Right.
I know something that I didn't know before. Gives me some insight into what motivates them. Gives me some insight into maybe some skills and capabilities I wasn't aware of or that I hadn't seen, because that didn't come up in the work I've seen them do. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity that comes in. And I think there's no risk in doing this.
Well, I think that there could be, and what would you say to create kind of a safe environment and to really kind of set the stage? I mean, would you do this as an offsite as opposed to incorporate into a part of a standing meeting as an example? How much time? I know it would be dependent on the number of participants, but you know, are there any guidelines that you would share based on your experience?
Good question. I do think you need to do it as part of a developmental opportunity. To just drop this into the regular Monday morning meeting, people are going to go, what's going on?
Right.
They're not going to, they may not trust, they don't know what your motivations are and things like that.
I think it has to be
set up properly. Very much. And part of that is you have to create the environment, you know, where that can happen. You have to have enough time. You don't need a lot of tools. I mean, literally you need a piece of paper and a pen for everybody and maybe some flip chart to capture the common ideas. And then you have a discussion, because you can then take it anywhere you want. You can then say, okay, can we use this to evaluate as a team? What are our strengths as a team? Then the next person we bring in, what would be really valuable to look for them to bring to us because we don't have it. So again, then you take that Kotter model, right? And you kind of lay it over that discussion to say strengths and weaknesses. How do we make sure we get to that upper right so we get the best of leadership and the best of management?
That management leadership model matrix.
Absolutely, because that's this idea of celebrating the diversity that exists within the organization of thought, idea, perspective, experience, all of those kinds of things. You want to get the best out of people to be able to do that. So you can learn a lot about your organization, I think, by doing this with them.
Right. So I think you've hit on some important things around self-awareness, reflecting, building, taking, investing on ourselves and our own leadership development, committing to that. And then these tools are so wonderful in that they can also be broader, have a broader application.
Correct.
So thank you very much for that and expanding on this, your personal best exercise. I know that you have some resources that you want to share also here.
Right. And I always tell folks who come to my programs, I said, I don't read books that you can't read. And everybody laughs at that. But I mean by saying they're packed full of really good information. They have great stories and great examples. And they are actually easy reads. They're not big tomes that you have to just kind of work yourself and force yourself.
And the terminology is such you can't.
And they bring to life with stories and examples, which I think is really important for people, because then they can take this concept that's been proposed and have a better understanding of what does that mean in practice or in application. So all of these are books that I think are really easy. And these people write well. So Kouzes and Posner and John Kotter, they're good storytellers. And I think especially for something, for people who are trying to learn, I want to make it not intimidating for them. I want it to be a valuable resource that they can go through.
But you have in John Kotter and Kouzes and Posner, people who've been at this
long
for
time.
Multiple decades. Their books sell millions and millions of copies for good reason, right? Because they are well written. There are stories we learn through stories and other examples, but they also are rooted in research, and they provide models and frameworks that help that we can carry in our heads and help us as we really hone our own leadership abilities.
And they're understandable and they're practical.
Right.
And that's the key.
And that's what we aim with the
Absolutely.
Clear-Sighted Career Series here,
Absolutely.
that it has to be expert, practical, and actionable.
Yep.
So
Yep.
thank you for giving us the
You're
best
welcome.
of the best, Paul. Real pleasure.
Sharon, it's always fun. Thank you so very much for the opportunity.
You're welcome. So I want to thank everyone again for joining us here at the Clear-Sighted Career Online Learning Series. And I want to encourage our alumni then to tap into other resources that the Alumni Association makes available. Those include our website, the my.nd.edu/career, where you'll find other services, programs, tools, and resources for your use. And secondly, you can contact our career advisor at career@alumni.nd.edu. Thank you.